Hi everyone, Robert with Odd Random Thoughts, and today I'm going to go over how to create your own web server using Linux Ubuntu 14.04 server. I've had quite a few people ask me about this and asked if I could do a video on it, and some people have had different questions about how to set it up and how to use the virtual hosts and how to get that working and all that. So I just thought I would go ahead and do a full tutorial. I'm also going to show you how to install WordPress on your server. WordPress is a very popular platform for people that want to create their own website at home. You can either do this for an internal site just for your own LAN, or you can actually reach outside your network and create external facing site. But what I've got so far is I've got a new installation of Ubuntu 14.04 server installed. I do have it installed as a virtual machine. It's running on my ESXi server that I recently built. And I may make a video on that at a later time, but it's a clean install. Like I say, all that I've put on it so far is SSH, so I could putty into the server, which is what I have up here on the screen right now. This is a terminal. So first thing we want to do to get started is go ahead and to update our repositories. So we'll type in our root password and go ahead and update this before we do any software installation. Now what we're going to want to do is install what's called a LAMP stack on this server, which is of course Linux, which we already have. Then we'll have the Apache, the MySQL, and the PHP. So we can do that all in one fell swoop with this command here. We'll type in sudo apt-get install, and we'll do lamp-server and add a caret to the end, and we'll do a -y. The -y just goes ahead and triggers a switch where it asks you, this is how much disk space you have, do you wish to proceed? This will just take you right on through without interruption. So we'll hit enter, and this will go ahead and install all of those. Now it's going to ask us for a MySQL password. This is going to be the main password that we use for our MySQL administration. So we'll put in a password. Just pick something somewhat secure and easy to remember, because you'll need to get back into your database at some time or another. So you want it to be something you can remember. So we'll enter that. It'll ask us to repeat. We'll just put in that same password again, and then it's going to go ahead and finish up the installation. There's going to be a few things that we want to do to secure our MySQL server once this gets through installing. It's not a very long install, so okay, restarting. Okay, so now we've finished installing the LAMP stack. So let me clear this out just to get a clean workspace here. Now what we're going to want to do is go ahead and initiate a command to install the database. It's going to create a directory layout for our databases. So we'll do sudo mysql_install_db. Okay. Now, as you can see here, we can also go ahead and continue by doing a secure installation. So we'll do sudo mysql_secure_installation and hit enter. It's going to ask if we'd like to change our current root password for the database. you can do that if you want. If you changed your mind, want to create a more secure password, you can enter that here. We're going to just hit enter. Well, it's asking for our current password, I'm sorry. Then it's going to ask, do we want to change that? So we'll hit no. We're going to keep the same password we created. And the rest of these, you're going to want to enter yes for all of these next questions. We want to remove the anonymous users. We want to disallow the root login for remote logins. And we want to remove the test database and any access to it. And do we want to write these tables? Yes. Okay, so now our installation should be pretty secure. There's something else that I like to do. Not everybody will talk about this, but this is something that I like to do to further secure the database. We're going to edit and take a look at the my.cnf file, which is part of the MySQL installation. So we'll find that file if we go to etc mysql, and we can list the files in that directory, and it's the my.cnf that we want to edit. So we'll do sudo nano my.cnf, and we're going to page down and find this line that says bind address. Now the bind address is just telling the server that it's going to listen only on this address, so you want to be sure that that's set to local machine, which 127.0.0.1 is the local machine. This will ensure that it's only accessible through that IP. So we also want to add a line here. We're going to add local dash in file equals 0. Equals 0. Okay. So what that is that's just patching a hole in MySQL that restricts access to the underlying file system. It just prevents anyone from loading files from the file system unless they have file level privileges to the database. So basically, unless you set a user with access to it, they will not be able to do anything with the files. So it just kind of patches a security hole that's in MySQL, so it's a good thing to add. We'll go ahead and write this file and exit, and let's clear it out again. Okay, so now we have the LAMP stack installed. We've secured MySQL. So now let's go to our web browser, and we'll type in the IP of our server, and hit enter. Okay, so now here is the default page for Apache. So you can see here that it is working. It says it works. You should replace the file in this directory before continuing. Okay, so let's go back to our terminal, and let's navigate to etc Apache 2 directory, and let's take a look at what's in there. Okay, you see that you have a sites available and a sites enabled folder directory there at the bottom. Now the sites available directory is going to hold your config files for any websites that you are running. Once you have enabled or started those config files, then they will show up in the sites enabled folder. So if we take a look at the sites enabled, we can see the default.conf is the only site running, and that is the one that's displaying the Apache page here that we saw. So let's go ahead and go to our sites available. We'll list the files in there, and we have the default and one for the SSL. So let's go ahead and copy the default config file and create one for our new test site. So we'll call this new test site.conf. Oh, we have to use sudo. Okay, so now we have the new test site.conf. So let's take a look at that file. We'll do sudo nano new test site.conf. Okay, and here you have the regular config. Under here where it says server name, that's where we're going to enter the domain for this website. So we'll do newtestsite.com and then also do a server alias of www, not to newtestsite.com. Now that's just going to ensure that you can find the site with or without the www. Now you'll notice the document root, it's saying that it's going to read files from the var/www/html directory. That's where it's going to read for the index files for this site. That'll be the root directory of the site. So I want to change this. Let me back out of this HTML, and I'm going to do a new testsite.com and just make a public HTML folder. Okay, so I do this because if I have multiple sites, I can make a new testsite.com public HTML for that site. If I had another site.com, I could do another site.com/public HTML, and they would each have their own root directory labeled by the domain name. So it just allows you to keep track of your sites and the files that are in there. So that's pretty much all that we need to do here. So let's go ahead and write that file. Remember what directory you created here. Okay, so new testsite.com/public HTML. So we'll go ahead and write that file and exit. We'll clear this. Now let's go to the var www directory and take a look at what's in there. Okay, so there's our HTML directory. That was the original subdirectory for our website files. So we want to make a new directory. We need to have our www and then the new testsite.com/public HTML. So we'll do a sudo make directory /p is going to create the parent directories of this string. So we'll do our new testsite.com/public _HTML and hit enter. Now we have created the directories that we defined earlier that are going to hold our files. So let's just make sure. Okay, so we have all our directories there. So let's go into the public HTML, and we have nothing in there. So let's create an index file for this. So we'll do sudo nano index.html. We'll go ahead and create a HTML tag. We'll create a head tag, and then we'll make a body tag, and then down here let's just put in test, and then we'll close all our tags out. Gotta have the slash there. Okay, so we have our open and closed HTML head and body tags, and within the body we put the word test. So we'll go ahead and write that file and exit. Now let's go back to our Apache directory. And then we want to go into our sites enabled and take a look. So as we knew already, we had our default comp file running already, which is this Apache page. So let's disable that site. So we'll do a sudo a2 disable site. Can't spell today. Okay, so that disabled that site. So we'll go ahead and reload Apache. Okay, now if we do a list, we have nothing running. So we'll go back to the sites available, and the one we want to start is new testsite.conf. That is the site that we created the index file for a minute ago with the word test. So here we'll do sudo a2 for enable site, new testsite.conf, and then we'll go ahead and restart our Apache service. Now if we go back to our web browser and refresh the page here, okay, now we see our page that says test. Okay, so now we have our site up and running. So next thing we want to do is let's talk about the virtual hosts for a minute. First, I want to show you in here, if we look at our apache2.conf, and we go down a little ways down here to the directory, it's telling us here that the var/www is our main root directory for our websites. So anything within that directory, any sites we create within there are going to take on the permissions of that folder, which are allowed by Apache to be read. So what we can do, we'll go ahead and clear this out. To get started with installing WordPress, firstly let's log into our MySQL server. So to do that, we'll do mysql-user root, and then we'll ask for our password. This will be the password we entered in earlier for our database. Hit enter. Okay, now we are within MySQL prompt. So first thing we'll do is we'll create a database. So let's do create database. We'll call it WordPress, and end all your commands in MySQL with a semicolon. So we'll create that database. Then let's create a user. This is going to be a database user. So we'll create user, and I'll just call this one Robert since that's my name, and this will be at localhost. Now you can make it whatever username you want, and then it will be identified by, and then put an apostrophe, and in here you're going to put your password. So we'll just call this password WordPress 123. You can use any password you want, and then close the apostrophe and add your semicolon, hit enter. Okay, and then we want to grant privileges on this database to this user. So we're going to grant all privileges. on the database WordPress and put a period and an asterisk, and then to this user, Robert at localhost, and of course you would put whatever user you created, and hit enter. And then we'll just to apply all this, we'll just flush the privileges, and again with the semicolon, and hit enter. And then we can just type exit to exit the MySQL database. Okay, so now we want to go ahead and download the newest version of WordPress. So let's just go to our home directory, cd with a tilde, and then we'll do a sudo wget, and we'll go to the WordPress site and do latest.tar.gz, and that will download WordPress into our home directory. So if we do a list, we can see we have the file there. So let's go ahead and extract it. So we'll do tar extract verbose file name latest.tar.gz. Okay, so that's now extracted the WordPress into our directory. So we updated our repositories earlier, so now we need to install a couple of packages that WordPress is going to need. So we'll do sudo apt-get, and we're going to install php 5-gd and libssh2-php. And we'll just do a -y to bypass the check. And those will go ahead and install. Okay, once those are installed, let's then go into our WordPress directory. Okay, and then we'll list here and take a look at the files. And there's a couple, there's a file here. See the sample file, the wp-config-sample. Let's make a copy of that to an actual WordPress config. So we'll do sudo copy the WordPress config-sample.php, and the new file name for the copy will be config.php, and hit enter. Okay, so now we have the wp-config.php, and this we're going to want to edit. So we'll sudo nano-config.php, and here we're going to enter in our database credentials. So our database name, if you remember, was WordPress, so we'll take this out, put in WordPress. Our database user, in my case it was Robert, and then the password, I just used WordPress 123. Now you'll probably want to use something a lot more secure than that, but this is just for demonstration. So now that we've entered in our database information, that's all we need to do with this file. So we'll go ahead and write this file and exit, and we'll clear that out. Okay, so now we need to copy this WordPress installation into the root directory for our web server. So let's go ahead and we'll put it in the regular HTML directory that's already there. And a good way to do this is by using rsync. So we'll do sudo rsync-av capital P. We'll do the tilde WordPress / and then we want to put it in our var www.html directory, and hit enter. Okay, so that has moved all of those files into there. So we need to make some permission changes here. So let's go into that directory. Okay, and there's our WordPress installation. So we want to create a user and a group ownership for all the files in this directory. So we'll do sudo change ownership -R, and this is going to be the user you use to log into your Ubuntu server. It would never be root. When you install your server, you'll create a user. Now you can use that user, or some people prefer to make a new user just for WordPress. But in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and use the user that I use to log in with. And then we'll put it in group www-data and a space and the asterisk. That'll say to apply this permission changes to everything in this folder. And then we'll hit enter. Okay, so that's changed all of our permissions. Okay, now let's create an uploads directory, and that's going to be found normally in WordPress. Will be under the wp-content directory. So we'll do sudo make directory and we'll do the var www.html wp-content/uploads. That's going to be our new directory. So we'll make that, and then we're going to change ownership of that to where any user can upload to it. So we'll do sudo change ownership-r no user www-data var www html content uploads, and hit enter. Okay, so we've now changed permissions on that. So now the rest of this we can do through our web browser. So let's just make sure this is working. First, let's go ahead and kill our other test site, because we don't have any host files set up to go to specific domains yet. Just out of curiosity, okay, so see, it doesn't work yet. What you have to do in order to get your virtual host to work is, if you're running an internal DNS server, and if you've watched my video on creating the Linux router with bind DNS and how to configure that DNS, then you would just simply go into your bind configuration, add this IP address, and point it to your domain that you want to use. Now that works great internally. If you're wanting your site to be accessible externally, which I'm sure most of you probably do, then you would need to go into the control panel for your domain, whoever you bought your domain from, and change the DNS records to point to your external IP address. Then from within your network, you would forward port 80 from your external address internally to the IP of your server. That way, when somebody called up your domain, now keep in mind, to do this externally, you have to own the domain. You can't just create a virtual host and it work. You have to own that domain, so the registrar, you can point it to your external IP. When it hits that IP, it will hit the DNS server internally, which will be forwarded through your router by port forwarding, and will be directed to the IP address of your server, which will then find the files for your website. So just to take a look at this WordPress, let's go ahead and go back to our Apache. To our sites enabled, and we have our new test site running. Now let's go ahead and disable this one. So we'll do sudo a2 dis site new test site .conf, and then we'll reload. Okay, so now we don't have that site running anymore. So now we're going to go ahead and create a file, a conf file for our WordPress site. So, or we could actually just edit the new test site.conf. So we'll do sudo nano and new test site.conf, and now we're going to change our root directory to HTML. Now remember, you can put your sites in any folders you want, whatever. We could have actually, when we transferred or copied all of our WordPress files over to this HTML directory, we could have copied them directly to the new testsite.com/public HTML folder, which for this example probably would have been better, but I'm not doing really any editing on this video. I'm just kind of going at it all in one shot, so you know, I should have done it a little differently, but either way will work just fine. So we'll just change our directory here to the directory where our WordPress installation is, and we'll go ahead and write that file. We'll exit, and then we'll re-enable that conf. So we'll do a sudo a2 enable site new test site.conf, and then we'll restart Apache, and then we'll make sure that it's running. So we'll list. Okay, so now our site's running. So now if we go back to our web browser, instead of seeing this test, we should load our WordPress site. So we'll refresh. Let's make sure we don't need to clear our cache. That's always something that can get you. Okay, so we've got something holding us up here. Let's see. Let me make sure IP config flush DNS. Okay, so I figured out what the issue was. Since I moved all of the WordPress files back into that default HTML directory, I discovered that the original index.html file was still in that folder. So I went ahead and removed it so it would read the only other index file in here, which is the index.php file. So now that I've done that and restarted Apache, I can go back to my IP of my server, and it brings up the WordPress page. So now we have where we can continue with our installation. We would just give a site title, a username, and it generates a password for you. You can change that if you wish, or you can change it later. You just put in your email address, and if you want it to be indexed, just check that box and then install WordPress. Now once you've got all that done, you can do things like setting up or changing your permalinks, all that stuff. That's all different stuff we're not going to cover in this tutorial, because WordPress is a whole other creature all on its own. You'd want to enable mod rewrites and create a htaccess file and all that kind of stuff. That's stuff that you can read up on your own time. But we did get the LAMP stack installed. We got everything secured. We got, well, I say secured. We got it secured, basic security performed on it. There's other things like securing your PHP installation and all that kind of stuff that you would have to read up on how to configure those, especially if it's going to be a public-facing site. Now the big thing most people are concerned with is for an internal site. External is easy. You just point your DNS to your external IP and forward your IPs to the server. But in this case, if this is an internal site, then we would have to make some modifications, like, because if we enter in new test site.com, it's not going to bring up our site. So the only way to get that to resolve properly is to configure your internal DNS server if you have one running. If not, what we can do is open up File Explorer here, go to Computer, C Windows, System 32. We'll go down here to Drivers, etc. And we want to edit this host file. And what you do is you'll go in there when you open it up, you can take a look at it. You would just add in the IP of your server and then give it, add the host name for it. There's a lot of things that you can do with DNS. If you were, say, creating, you know, an internal website, like if you wanted to create a web page for, or a WordPress site for everyone in your house to, let's say it popped up a page that had links to your media server and to maybe weather widgets and news and stuff like that, to where whenever anybody opened their browser it would default to the internal LAN's website that maybe had updates, or you could even make it with a family schedule of events or whatever you wanted. That way everybody would see it when they logged on to the internet. You could do all that with internal DNS and just point your web server IP to that specific domain through DNS. Externally, like I say, is just a little different. You would just have to go to your registrar control panel and point your domain name to your public facing IP, and then once it hit your public IP, you would have to forward the ports for port 80 to go through and point it to your server's IP address. And at that point you could also enable internal DNS if you wanted subdomains and whatnot. But that's pretty much it. That's how you get Apache and the LAMP stack up and running. I hope I didn't derail too much. We had a couple of small issues, but that's always good. It helps you learn more and shows you a little bit of how to diagnose those issues. But I hope this has answered some of the questions I received on how to do all this stuff. There may be a few things I've left out, some things I didn't go into too great of detail on, but that should be enough to get you up and running. And a little bit of Google can go a long ways, but I am here to help. So if you have any questions and I can help answer them, just leave them in the comments below. But I guess for now that's all I have on this. If I come up with anything else later, I'll do an update video or something. But anyway, good luck to y'all, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And please subscribe if you hadn't. I hadn't got a whole lot of videos up lately, but I try to do them as time allows. I'm going to school and working both, so full time. So in fact, I'm just starting back to school. I haven't been to college, and it's been 16 years since I was in college last. So it's kind of be a new experience for me, and I'm excited about that. I'm actually going for my network systems administration degree. So anyway, best of luck, and I wish you well. I'll catch you next time.